the key thing that you have to do on a regular basis is to make a list of your non-negotiables. That's the first thing you must do. And that's the key to getting rid of stuff. You don't just say, I want to get rid of it for the sake of getting rid of it. And you don't say, I want something just because you want it. As an entrepreneur, Dan Sullivan says, an entrepreneur can say, I want it because I want it. That's an acceptable thing to say.
That's right.
But, you want to have reasons for wanting something. And the reason to get rid of something is it might not meet one of your non-negotiables.
What's up, everybody? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow Chart podcast with your boys, Matt Wolf and Joe Fear.
All right, Brian, round 2 is live. Thanks for joining us again.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. I saw on Facebook you had interviewed a friend, I guess it was Ryan Lee, I think.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and so, Ryan is like my brother, and so I said, I usually don't ask to be on a show, but I've been on your show. So then I said, okay, if I ask them, if I ask them, and they hated me the first time, then I'm in big trouble. But thank goodness that you asked me on again. And it's been a couple of years.
It has.
A lot has happened, although the same stuff has happened, which is good too. And
yeah.
I was just so pleased when you said, come on back on. And I love you guys. I mean, you guys are just have a great vibe. And I know you love baseball. I love baseball.
Well, we just spent the last almost 20 minutes talking about that. It's been fabulous.
Right. And you've got something good here, and I wanted to be part of it again. So thank you for inviting me again.
You're very
cool.
welcome.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's in our community has loved you and your book Overdeliver, which
thank you.
Is still going strong. It sounds like,
Yeah, and I just sold out my inventory of 10,000 books, so I have to get my publisher to agree to maybe print another 10,000. We'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe after this podcast, I'll sell 5,000 on this podcast, right?
Yeah, there we go.
We'll be that for you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So since we last talked, there's been a global pandemic. I
didn't know anything about it, but I just heard about it the other day. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Let's get you up to speed a little bit.
So I'm curious. I think this might be a good place to start is, what have you been doing since the last time we talked? Because I think, the world has changed quite a bit. And I know you probably had to make some pivots of your own in your own business. And there were some health issues that popped up for you. So,
right.
What's kind of happened since we last chatted?
Yeah, a lot has happened. But, the thing about, I mean, pivot was the word of the year, right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And I got to tell you, I had a mastermind meet that I have two masterminds, but one of them meets live, although it's been virtual during the pandemic. And I remember we sent the swag box, and on the outside of the swag box, I wanted to have a quote of some kind. And the quote that I put on the last swag box, which was for the virtual event, was something like, entrepreneurs don't have to pivot because they're pivoting all the time. And
true.
To be an entrepreneur, you had to make the ultimate pivot, whether at the initial phase of entrepreneurship or at some point in your career. And, because you're always thinking ahead as an entrepreneur, you're always not, some entrepreneurs are a little bit gloom and doom, but most are pretty upbeat. And so you have that upbeat attitude in your mind, and you can, you're always thinking ahead. And even if you're not thinking about, oh, there's going to be a pandemic next year, the fact that you'll be so prepared because you're always thinking in terms of your life is a pivot. It's one thing, it's opportunities and choices and opportunities and prioritizing those opportunities. In fact, Dan Sullivan, who runs Strategic Coach, he's the top coach for entrepreneurs in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And, he says, when the pandemic hit, he said, I know that the people in Strategic Coach are going to be way ahead of everybody else because it's the entrepreneurs that are going to be out ahead much faster. And everything he said was true. I mean, just the idea of going from live events to virtual events and what we've seen in that evolution. I mean, we had virtual events before. We certainly had live streams of live events, but the idea that we went to big live enrollment type events where you sell stuff on stage to the Zoom screen, and everybody that I've talked to, if they did it right with the right companies, and there are a few companies that were leading the way in this area. They all had their best year ever in the last year during COVID. And, you don't want to brag about that because a lot of people suffered. I mean, I don't know about you, but I got a lot of closed restaurants and dry cleaners and all kinds of stuff in my neighborhood. And it's depressing and it's sad. And, the pandemic was nothing to sneeze at, nothing to sneeze in your mask. But it was brutal. And yet the people that I've been hanging around with, including myself, I had my best year yet. And I'm not bragging. I don't mean to brag to say that, but it was the ability to be in that lifelong pivot, so to speak. So as far as my business goes, I mean, I always said I predicted the pandemic, because in December of 2019, I decided to launch a virtual mastermind. I didn't know any. I didn't even know where Wuhan was. Believe me. So I launched because I had 2 other masterminds before that. I had a high-end mastermind, $25,000 small group mastermind, and then I had a middle group, which was like I called the Titans Master Class, and that was kind of like a $10,000 mastermind, 2 events a year instead of 3. And I'll tell you, I didn't want to do 5 events anymore. I had 3 for my mastermind, 2 for the master class. I said, I don't want the master class anymore. And I'm in a position where I can say, and I know you talk about this a lot on your podcast, what to get rid of is just as important as what to do. And so, but I didn't necessarily had to replace it with something, but I wanted to replace it with something that would be much more meaningful and virtual, that I wouldn't have to do live events. That was the initial thing. And so in December of 2019, I launched Titans Accelerator. And, from there to now, I've got now 250 members at somewhere between, depending on if you came in on the original launch or recently, somewhere between, say, $1,500 a year and $2,000 a year. And so that was December. So then March, COVID hit. So one of the basic benefits of the group were, it included a lot of stuff, benefits, but the big one was a live call with me once a month, a live Zoom call for 2 hours, doing hot seats and discussions and all of that. So I pivoted within the pivot, so to speak. So COVID hit, and I said, well, I'm going to be home. So I went to weekly calls instead of, and this is in the spirit of over-delivering too. So it fit perfectly with my brand and everything I was doing. So I went to weekly calls instead of monthly. And I mean, think about how that affected my renewal rate after a year.
Oh my God.
I mean, I got a 70% renewal rate on the initial launch. I wouldn't have gotten that without the weekly calls. And the weekly calls, I started bringing in all the speakers that would come to my live masterminds, because they're sitting at home too. And I could get them live at my masterminds, but now getting them on Zoom was simple. So I got Jay Abraham, and I got Ben Settle, and I got Ryan Lee, I got Perry Marshall. It was basically Titans of direct response to for a $2,000 mastermind. Jeez. And it just fell into place. But again, because it wasn't, I didn't. Look, I lucked out. I launched it before COVID. If I launched it during COVID, I think I would have been as successful. So that wasn't the issue. But the fact that I was thinking ahead to a virtual mastermind, and then the circumstances enabled me to enhance it because of COVID, not in spite of COVID. Right. And so that was very fortunate. And then, I built on that. I've also, that I own the exclusive rights to Breakthrough Advertising, which is the masterpiece written by Gene Schwartz in 1966. The book is 100% relevant today as it was in 1966, because human behavior hasn't changed. People are still people. People still have the same emotions and tendencies to buy that they did I say in the afterword of the book that I wrote, that they have it's not just 1966, it's 1066 AD. Same emotions, And so I decided to do something just recently that, again, because we're in a Zoom virtual environment, what else can we do that can enhance not just it's not to enhance my brand, it's to enhance my mission, which is to teach everything that I've done over the last 40 years and share everything I've learned from the mentors I've had, and including Gene Schwartz.
Gene Schwartz, yeah.
So I just launched this. I called it the Breakthrough Advertising Quick Start Bootcamp. I don't like short-term things. I'm a long-term guy. I have a long view of the world. Mm-hmm. But this made sense to do a 2-week sprint. I didn't want to do a full-blown course. I didn't want to do anything like that. But breakthrough advertising, you pay $125 for the book, which is cheap compared to what you buy it on Amazon or eBay, which is $500 or more. Right. But if you're going to buy a $125 book, it's still expensive. You want to get a lot out of it. And what I found is that people were buying it on reputation, but they weren't reading it. They weren't studying it. They weren't applying it. And it is a dense book. It's not a beginner's book in copywriting and marketing by any means. Right. So that became an opportunity. So I did this. I'm in it right now. We just finished the first week of 2 weeks, and so it's a quick start boot camp. We'll have like 7 or 8 calls over 2 weeks with assignments from the book to apply to everybody's avatar, everybody's category of what they're marketing to. And, I just love it. It's like, and I think the people after 2 weeks with me and my marketing partner, Chris, I think after 2 weeks, I just might be able to sell them into Titan's Accelerator. Imagine that, right?
Yeah, it's a perfect way in.
Yeah, it's like ascension programs. I didn't know they existed. No,
well, what's the plan with the boot camp? Is this every 2 weeks kind of thing?
Yeah, so I also, and you'll appreciate this, I practice what I preach in terms of mailing to my list. Mm-hmm. So I have thousands of breakthrough advertising buyers in over 50 countries around the world. So what I did was I did an RFM select on my breakthrough advertising buyers. If those of you who are listening don't know what RFM is, it's all about, it's in chapter 4 of my book, Overdeliver, but it's recency, frequency, monetary value. Yep. That's the way you categorize any list, any names, any audience, by how recently they responded, how frequently they responded, how much money they spend with you. And I can get into that as a whole nother podcast one day, but I don't think we want to spend time there. But I took the breakthrough advertising buyers. We'll say I probably have maybe close to 3,000, but then I broke them up into quarterly segments. So we went back to like the most recent quarter because they'll be the most responsive, but not the immediate because they have to still read the book. Yep. So I did the whole timing thing. So this first boot camp was like the last 3 months that we decided. It's successful. I've got over 40 people in it. I'm going to go back to the next 3 months and the next 3 months until I don't get response. And the thing is, I will get response because as long as the email addresses, I mean, they'll, at some point, I won't be able to update the email addresses and it'll get old. But I remember in my direct mail days, we used to go back to expires like 7 and 8 years. Because in direct mail, you could correct the address. You could do address change mailings. So we used to like segment our expires like that. The last 3 month expires are going to be your best customers for a new subscription. Yeah. The 3 to 6 months will be the next best. The 6 to 12 months will be the next best. And we did that going back 6 or 7 years. Jeez. So I'm using everything that I learned in direct mail 101 to do a virtual breakthrough advertising quick start boot camp today with the goal of moving them into my virtual mastermind. Wow. So what goes around comes around. It's like and that's why when I think about and the a couple of people who reviewed my book on Amazon, I had 5 1-star reviews out of like 300 or 200. And one of them said that chapter 3 is how paying postage made me a better marketer, which is, about just the fundamentals of direct mail are important. Not that I'm saying do direct mail, I'm saying the fundamentals are important to apply to online. But chapter 2 is the importance of original source. And I repeated it over and over again in chapter 2. And that's what the person who gave me the 1-star review had trouble with. She said, you could have done that chapter in a paragraph, she said. But the point was, I was so obsessed with it, the idea of eternal truths, fundamentals, bedrock principles that you build on. I mean, I just watched Genius Picasso. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's amazing.
No.
The Genius series is amazing. It's Einstein, Picasso, and now it's Aretha Franklin.
Oh, wow.
But
Okay.
the Picasso one, I quote Picasso all the time. He had the quote that says, "Learn the rules like a pro, so you can break them like an artist." And that's the essence of what my career is about, and what a lot of careers are about, who are a little bit older, but hopefully a little bit wiser, not staying in the past, but seeing what in the past can apply to everything that's state of the art in the future. And that's been my game my whole life, and I'm going to stick to it.
Yeah, and the rules, like you said, it doesn't sound like the rules really changed even through COVID, right? I mean, it's the
No,
art has changed, maybe.
yeah, exactly. Nothing. COVID was, it sucked. I mean,
Oh yeah,
I mean,
it still sucks for a lot. I
it
mean,
still sucks.
emotionally, business, all that. Yeah,
Exactly. And so, I'm not making light of it at all. And that's why I still watch the news, just to get a sense of
yeah.
of the suffering that has happened, and I've given a lot of money to various food banks and charities and things like that. It's the only thing I can really do to help. But the other thing I can do to help is that as we come out of it, people who are unemployed or want to enhance their careers, I can help them if they want to learn copywriting or learn direct response marketing. And so I have a role to play, as we all do. You guys do too.
Yeah.
And so I just think that but as far as, and the thing that I did that was that because I was home so much, I ended up catching up on a lot of other podcasts and videos and trainings. And then other people were forming Zoom groups and accountability groups. And so it wasn't like I wouldn't say it was overkill. It was just like there was so much available. And that's what we thought. As soon as we heard about COVID and there was going to be quarantines, the obvious thing was everybody said, everybody's going to be home, we're going to sell more. And that was true. If you have a digital product or you sell online exclusively and you know what you're doing, you should have had an increase in sales during COVID, depending on what you're selling, of course. But but if you're selling supplements, if you're selling exercise, even, exercise videos, whatever you're selling that could be done in the home, you have, the big issues were, because I had people in my mastermind group who were dentists and lawyers and things like that. I mean, dentists, that was a tough one. You got to be in someone's mouth.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be in someone's mouth when they're wearing a mask and they're quarantined. Just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So, I encourage them to do some supplement stuff for, or a teeth whitening, something that they could do at home or something, just to keep the revenue coming in and not throw your arms up and say, I can't do this anymore. And I even, consulted with a couple of restaurants, to get proactive about takeout and delivery, like, hire high school students who are out of school to give out flyers in the neighborhood with menus and, I want to cook dinner for you tonight, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Frank Kern gave me a great idea when I interviewed him, because I interviewed some people too. I don't have a podcast, but I interviewed some people, at the beginning of COVID, and there was not, in the marketing community, there was not a lot of pessimism.
No, it was very much like, hey, we got this. Let's just pivot. We're gonna,
right. It's sort of like in sports, it's like next man up, right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, no, I do feel like especially in the digital marketing space, a lot of people were kind of like, this is our time to shine. That, we've been preparing for this. I feel like, especially like our business specifically, I feel like we were positioned for it. We didn't sort of plan for it. We didn't know it was happening, but we have online courses, we have a podcast, we're online educators. in the marketing space. So a lot of people were at home trying to figure out what to do, trying to figure out how to make money. Where are they going to go? They're going to go online and start Googling online businesses, starting a podcast, starting a YouTube channel, things like that.
You know what the difference is? The difference is that in the old school, Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach says that coaching is to 2021 as management was to 1980 and before. And so, and the difference between educating and coaching versus consulting are completely different. Consulting is more in that management category,
very much
and
so.
coaching is more in that entrepreneurial, progressive, proactive attitude. And so, you know, as you said, you're educators, so you're just gonna you don't have to label yourself as consultants. You're gonna just continue to do what you're doing and put it on steroids online, because you're already online. And there's just more and more that you can handle, and more that you can do. And so when Dan talks about coaching being the new management, everything needs coaching. I always say that, in my neighborhood here, I have a lot of financial planners and people who work in big corporations, and when they get let off, they become consultants, which means they're unemployed.
Right.
And I don't know any coach who ever thinks they're unemployed.
Right. No.
Right. So I don't want to get too semantic with it, but I really believe that coaching is something that, whatever you do, I mean, if you have a piece of do-it-yourself software, it's going to need coaching. If you do done for you, which I don't believe in done for you, that's another topic altogether. But if you do done for you, it still needs coaching.
100%.
In fact, Agora Publishing, they used to have these lifetime subscriptions to their newsletters, right? Online newsletters for investing. But there was, so then you say, okay, you charge them what you think you can charge them for a lifetime subscription. You get your money up front, and then you service them, and you just keep servicing them. But they were smart enough to have something called a maintenance fee on the lifetime subscription. So the maintenance fee was like yearly at $49 or $99. So you're still getting revenue in, and you're coaching them it's like, you'll have a webinar during the year. They have a lifetime subscription, but the maintenance fee lets them get in on anything new beyond what they paid for the lifetime. So you say it's a lifetime, they pay you, and then you're done with them. No, there's always going to be more. There's always more, right? So, and it always seems to be involved in some, either directly or indirectly, to some kind of coaching and educating, and I know you guys do that, and I know you relate to that.
And what I'm hearing here with the pivot that you have with the virtual mastermind, and then even with the boot camp and all this stuff, well, actually more the mastermind is you have recurring now, at a much more smaller level, obviously, than the big masterminds. But you're also curating a lot of this content, like with these interviews, bringing Frank Kern in there, Perry, and all of that. We've seen that's been a kind of a mental shift the last maybe couple year and a half for us, is like, wait, hold on. Our job is curating. And of course, doing the research and
absolutely
sure the wisdom's coming out, but that's coaching in itself as well.
I know, but and you guys, I'm sure you realize, outside of this interview, you'll have a lot of interviews that'll be worth using again in your business.
Come on now.
And so what happened was I started my business indirectly when I did the Titans of Direct Response event in 2014. Big event, a celebration of the company I was at, Boardroom, Marty Edelston, the founder. That's where I had, Jay Abraham and Dan Kennedy and Gary Bensavenga. It was like, an amazing event, right? So after I left Boardroom, I had all that content, which I've used over and over again. At Boardroom, we used to do these greatest hits books, and we used to say, how many ways can you slice the salami? Well, you can slice it very, very thin and often, because if you have content, not everybody's going to see the content all the time, and you guys know this. And even if you repeat stuff a year later, it's new for a big chunk of the audience. So, but then as I started doing the masterminds, the live masterminds. Then all of a sudden, I did 2.5 days of masterminds with like 5 or 6 speakers. Every one of those presentations is videotaped, and I've got Perry Marshall, and I've got Dan Kennedy, and I've got Jay Abraham, and I've got all these amazing presentations from the best marketers of all time.
Yeah.
They go in the vault. And you've got a vault that's incredible, right? Because because your podcast, and also
well, it's
whatever
because
else
you're in there actually.
You're a brown nose. Okay, so then and then when I started doing the accelerator group, I give them in the accelerator group. It got to be weekly calls, and then it was I would put I wanted to have physical product with it. So I send them, I was going to do a newsletter, a print newsletter once a month but I said, nah, I don't want to do a newsletter. I did newsletters, been there, done that. Yeah. So I wanted to do a monthly USB, which I send out once a month with all the calls, the recordings of the calls during the month. And I said, hey, wait a minute, I'll bring something from the Titans vault from the last 6 years from the mastermind. So I'm dripping them amazing content every month. Sometimes I even throw 2 things in from the vault. So I over-deliver. Yeah. And then I also have a swipe. I have I have swipe files up the wazoo. I can give them a swipe of, basically a mailing piece or a letter or a video of some product promotion that I can put that on the USB. And then we started doing like on the weekly calls, then we started doing a breakthrough advertising study group, because people in the group really like breakthrough advertising. This is before the boot camp. And so we'd record those, and those would go on the USB. So I just sent out the April USB, and I had to get a higher storage USB to put everything on it. Whatever a higher storage USB is. I don't know what I'm talking about tech-wise, but I just love the idea of, curating. Curating was the right word. That's the right word. Curating content with the ability to fit with your mission, because the content was originally curated within what you were already doing.
That's right. Yeah.
So everything becomes related, and it becomes this cornucopia of just great stuff.
It really is fun. Once we harness, we're like, oh, we're curators. It's our job to bring the right people and then deliver their message, but also it's our job to formulate this message however it best fits the mediums. And
exactly,
we're doing a lot more of that, in the future with video too. That's going to be a whole nother evolution of curation, but we'll leave that for now.
What I think, as far as the pivot off the pivot, people say, what's going to happen to live events? Now that we're coming out of it. And I believe that, first of all, I've learned this from people who have done it, but I'm not a big believer in the hybrid event. People have done it. So a hybrid event would be, live and virtual at the same time.
Right.
It's doable. I think it's a pain for both the audience and the people who are doing the event, because you have to serve 2 masters. Because it's not a live stream of a live event. That's not a hybrid. A hybrid would be that you're paying attention to both audiences equally and totally, and you can't do that. I don't think. Well, you can't do it well. So what I think is going to happen is, my mastermind, the high end one, that one was geared for live events. So I don't think I even want to do a virtual event once we're going live again, but I will do some videos. I could do some Zoom calls, whatever, in between the meetings, but I want to go to 3 live events a year. And I want to keep it that way. But I think that a lot of masterminds and 3 time a year type events will go to maybe 1 live, 2 virtual. And so they'll mix it up that way. On my accelerator group, which was it's all virtual. It started all virtual.
Right.
That one, I'd like to maybe do 1 live event for the accelerators.
Yeah.
Charge them what it costs me basically to feed them and for the hotel.
So like a one-time fee on top of the subscription.
Yeah, exactly. And just have them come, and I'll have the mastermind people there, and I'll merge them and all that. And That's for 2022 though. I can't think about that now. But it'll be interesting to see, because basically there's a concept that Dan Sullivan has in Strategic Coach, and he calls it the 4 C's. And the 4 C's are, hopefully I can get them right. So I always forget them, but what you do is, if you have a project, something you want to work on, you make a commitment to it, right? And you make a commitment, you're going to do it. And then you go through the second C is courage. You have to have courage in that second phase, because you're working it out. You are figuring it all out. And basically he says courage is a shitty place. I don't know if am I allowed to curse on this podcast?
You can just say whatever you want.
I just did.
All good.
So basically courage is a crappy place.
Yeah.
But you have to get through it, because once you get through it, then you have a new capability. Like anybody who went through the first virtual events from the live events, there was a lot of courage in there, a lot of mistakes, a lot of stuff. Once they got through it, new capability. Once you have a new capability, then you have that's the third C. The fourth C is confidence to do another commitment. And the commitment is going to involve something new with more courage. So it's I like it because it's a great construct to look at issues and projects and whatever. If it's a pivot, a pivot can be a new pivot is a commitment.
It is.
But if you look at it in that context, you also don't get depressed when you're in the courage phase, right?
Right.
Because that could really work against you.
Yeah.
But I love Dan's I love the way he has that, because I look at everything that I do through the 4 C's, because I don't get too down or too up, because you're going to get really up when you make a commitment to something you're excited about. You're going to be like high as a kite. Then you're going to be in the courage phase, and you're going to be down in the dumps.
Yeah.
Then you're going to have this new capability and saying, I'm Superman. And then you're going to make another commitment, high as a kite. It's But the key is to regulate those ups and downs, right?
And as entrepreneurs, we need that. That's for
you need that, right?
Yeah.
And that's why Strategic Coach is such a valuable program, because it keeps you in check.
Yeah. Well, so I know that we've talked a lot about the stuff that you've changed and done differently during COVID. I'm curious, what sort of things have you sort of shaved off your plate? Because before we hit record, one of the things we were talking about is actually, figuring out how to do less and stop doing the things you don't like in your business. So what are some of the things that you've shaved off? And, let's talk about how you've managed to shave them out of the business.
Yeah, I mean, I think that interestingly, one of my favorite books on this topic is Essentialism by McCune. And one of the things I love the book. I love everything about it. My favorite chapter was the one on sleep. Since I read that book, I've never gotten less than 7 hours.
I got to reread
more
that
than 9 hours.
I see it actually see it on your bookshelf right there.
Oh yeah, I do too.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
It's on the bottom part. Right?
Oh yeah, look at that. I'm surprised you can see it with my bookshelf being so messy. And that's only the tip of the iceberg. Check this out.
Holy moly!
Oh, wow.
Look at that.
You definitely have a library.
It's basically either very impressive or a ridiculous mess.
Yeah, I mean, my bookshelf is equally as messy, but not nearly as big.
You have about
but if it's big and you can't find anything, it sucks.
Yeah.
But anyway, so in Essentialism, McCune says everything has to be a hell yes or a no.
Right.
So it's either a 10 or a 0 on a scale of 1 to 10. And I wrote a blog post recently about, I just can't live like that. I like to have some 7s and 8s. Now, if you have all 7s and 8s, that's not good. And if some of those 7s or 8s are really 4s, that's not good either. So you have to be judicious in how you rate things and decide what is worth doing and what's not worth doing. I mean, the thing I shaved off pre-COVID was the Titans Masterclass. I think the last one I did was November of 2019, as a matter of fact. And I knew I wasn't going to do another one. It was a great event, fantastic event. But I just, I didn't want it anymore. And so that's that. And I think to get there, one of the key things, and I learned this from Barry Baumgartner and Blue Melnick are, they run a company called Sage Productions. And they're one of those companies that enabled small companies and big companies make the pivot from live to virtual events. I mean, they do Russell Brunson's event, they do Stu McLaren's event, they do Jeff Walker's events. I mean, they're the shit. I mean, they're awesome. And they did Tony Robbins. They did Tony Robbins virtual with 23,000 people.
And he is
In
crushing
fact,
it.
Blue Melnick, this is interesting. Blue Melnick developed stuff on Zoom that the president of Zoom wanted to meet with him on, and they called it, I think he called it Zoomzilla, and it was something that Blue developed with the people at Zoom. So that's how state of the art
Wow.
Blue is.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
And so when he was I lost my train of thought because I went on 2 tangents in the
Well, we
middle
were
of
talking
something.
about the rating and yeah, and the oh man, yeah, was it rating? Because I know it was like rating.
Oh yeah, so everything's got to be a 10, or it doesn't have to. It can be, some things can be 7s and 8s.
Right.
I think that when everybody went to virtual from live, they had to jump in feet first, and
Yeah.
so that was an easy one to say yes to. But I know what I got it now. So Barry Bumgarner also, what she says in terms of just with an entrepreneurial mindset, the key thing that you have to do on a regular basis is to make a list of your non-negotiables. That's the first thing you must do. So a non-negotiable would be something like the one that comes to mind is when she was doing it with Jeff Walker. So Jeff Walker is, does PLF Live. He does Launch Club. He has his mastermind. He does launches, but he had some non-negotiables. One non-negotiable is that between certain months of the year, he's an avid skier, lives in Colorado, and he said, these days are powder days. I'm going skiing, no matter what. Yep. That's a good example that popped into my head. But we all have things like that. Yeah. But if you don't treat them as non-negotiables, then stuff creeps in on them. So that's the key. So I'm not as good at it as probably someone like Jeff, but I'm getting better at it over the years. And that's the key to getting rid of stuff. You don't just say, I want to get rid of it for the sake of getting rid of it. And you don't say, I want something just because you want it. As an entrepreneur, Dan Sullivan says, an entrepreneur can say, I want it because I want it. That's an acceptable thing to say.
Yeah, that's right.
But, you want to have reasons for wanting something. And the reason to get rid of something is it might not meet one of your non-negotiables. A non-negotiable for me is if I'm immersed in any technology with a project, it's gone. Now if I can find the right technologist to do it for me, I'm in.
Right.
But I'm not in it if I have to do it. If I'm involved in, there are a lot of things like that. Cause on Colby, I'm a 9 quick start and a 3 follow through. So, which is typical for an entrepreneur.
To what I got. Yeah. That's it.
And so I've got people around me who are 7s in follow through.
Yeah.
Because if I didn't have that, then I wouldn't do anything.
So that's like an integrator type person for you.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, yeah, as a matter of fact.
You have it right there?
Rocket fuel.
There you go.
Yep.
and I only have it here because Mark Winters is speaking at my mastermind next week.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah.
Cool. Plug for Rocket Fuel. Great book.
Great book. Yeah. So it's almost like you have the non-negotiables, you got to identify them, but also next step is kind of carve out space for those non-negotiables, time-wise, maybe time blocking or shaving off from the business.
Right. And then if it's a non-negotiable that's critical to doing something that you really want to do, you got to buy it on the outside. I mean, Dick Benson, who was my direct mail consultant in the 1980s and early 90s, he said to me, one of the first things he said to me when I started working with him, one of his rules of thumb is, and everybody says this, but he was the first one that said it to me, do what you do best and buy everything else around the corner. He was talking about direct mail and letter shopping and printing and copywriting and list buying. And so you do what you do best and you buy all those other things around the corner. And he taught me how to buy a la carte, because I never would go to an agency, because the best copywriters aren't at agencies. They're freelancers because they can make more money, and they're making more money because they're better. Yep. I mean, that was just a natural progression. So he taught me how to buy a la carte for marketing services. And he also taught me to buy on the outside. Wow. And do what you do best on the inside. And it ties into Dan Sullivan's concept of unique ability. Everybody has a unique ability. If you can be 80 or 90% in that unique ability all the time, your life's going to be golden.
Yeah.
but it's not that easy. It's easier said than done. I understand that. And if you're just starting out or you're on the rise in your business, you don't have the luxury of, you don't have the budget to buy everything on the outside.
That's true.
So you end up doing stuff that might be stuff that you don't do well. I mean, I tell people now, I mean, I'm looking back. So I had all these issues in my career, but now looking back, I tell people I'm retired, but it's a different definition of retirement. I've retired from things I don't like to do. I've retired from things I don't do well. And I retired from people I don't want to hang out with anymore. So based on that criteria, I'm basically 80% retired.
Yeah.
I still get involved in things that I don't do well, and I'm doing it. That's a big one. That's another thing, not just the non-negotiables, but think about what you don't do well.
Yeah.
I mean,
the
I don't do.
Energy it's sucking up.
Yeah, it's an energy suck. Absolutely. I mean, I don't think any of this stuff is like an epiphany to anybody listening. But
it's a great reminder. I think it's stuff that people need to hear over and over and over again, because it's so easy to understand these concepts, sort of make steps to do it, and then fall back into your own habits pretty quickly.
Yeah, well,
right. And I think from my perspective, maybe my perspective will help them, because I've been in business for 40 years.
Right.
I don't have to do anything, and I can choose what I want to do. But I've been through the 40 years. I've been at every step. I've been at every step in terms of, being bombarded with things that were on my non-negotiable list, and I was doing them. So I negotiated it. Yeah. I negotiated it into my life. And so, I'm speaking, I guess, from experience. So, you can't beat yourself up either. No. You can't beat yourself. It's going to happen, especially if you're an entrepreneur. And so, so this is not a lecture. This is more like an overview of a lifetime of doing it, and maybe some advice as to, how to stay out of it as much as you can. And, that's why you have to have a list. You got to write stuff down. You got to keep on renegotiating your non-negotiables. Nothing is set in stone, although if it's a real non-negotiable, it might be set in stone. But it might not be set in stone forever. Nothing is forever.
Nothing is. Yeah, you're right. And it's a lot shorter than we believe as well. Life is long, but also goes by very fast.
Yeah, I have that in chapter 10 of Overdeliver. I start with a quote, "Life is long." That's from Marty Ellison.
Yeah.
And, the only reason I say that is, life is short. We know that. If you say life is long, it's the concept of it's the only one you got. So if you look at it as long, then it's in the context of where you are, where you're going, what you want to do every day. So I think it's more productive to think of life as long as opposed to life as short.
I like that. And Brian, I mean, through your experience in coaching so many people throughout the years as well, and you said there's probably like 4-ish times in your life where, the stages and phases, but are there certain ones that seem to pop up in a lot of entrepreneurs that you've seen when you look back at your life, that you can maybe give a couple tips and be like, okay, maybe that was a stage that we could have progressed a little quicker, or maybe bypassed?
That's a good question. I guess, I've coached a lot of people on hot seats, which is where you learn a lot about, how the struggling entrepreneur is dealing with stuff today.
Yeah.
I know how I dealt with it. But I always knew that I guess one of the big concepts that I got early on is the difference between commodity and specialty. And the more that you're mired in a commoditized product, a commoditized way of thinking, a me too attitude or a me too business, it's just not the way, it's just not going to be as fulfilling, as productive. And so whenever someone is on a hot seat and I'm coaching them, I try to get them to just go deeper and deeper and deeper. There's a lot of exercises to do this, in terms of finding your audience and finding your avatar and all of that, where, okay, my avatar is X. And if you find them, then what else? What other characteristics might they have? And so if they have that, what else would they have? It's like, you got that, give me more. You got that, give me more. You got that, give me more. So that's not coaching. That's just like getting them to not give up.
Yeah. And
not stop. And that's a characteristic of great marketers and great copywriters, which is insatiable curiosity
Mm.
and never being satisfied with the first, second, or 10th answer. And so my friend, I have a friend, Michael Fishman, who does coaching for in the health industry. And he has a concept that says, if you can explore what, say you're looking at your audience and you're looking for a hook for the audience, you're looking for a way to specialize your product to them, a way to differentiate yourself to them. You have to take a look at 3 phases of your audience. It's what they will tell you, what they won't tell you, and what they can't tell you.
Mm.
So what they will tell you is, and the example Michael gives is like you have a flooded basement, your basement floods. And so what they will tell you about, and say you're selling the most amazing water pump of all time. I'm just using a loose example here. And so what they will tell you is that my basement gets flooded, my house has water in it, it smells and mold happens. They will probably tell you that.
Sure.
What they won't tell you is that I'm embarrassed to have people come over to my house because, and all of that. And what they can't tell you, they don't even know.
Mm.
And that might be that this is like, it might be it come down to like shelter. This is my shelter, the basic, one of the basic building blocks of life, a place to live with a roof over my head, right?
Yeah.
And so if you get to those 3 levels, you can come up with ways to reach them that might not be the obvious and might not be. I mean, some people say, one guy was asking me a question. I had a call with Agora today with their copywriters, and he said, I don't want stuff that's just clickbaity and hypey and all that. Well, you got to research to find out stuff that's not clickbaity and hypey. You got to go deep, multiple levels. And the beauty is we have tools. Facebook forums and groups that you can sit in on and listen in and look at the language people are using. Going on Amazon,
Reddit too. Spend a lot of time on Reddit.
1-star and 5-star reviews of the books that people read in your group. So there's and look, believe me, Gene Schwartz was doing this in 1966, and he did not have any of these tools.
Right.
So you can't be lazy. You can't be lazy. You really have to go deep. And so I didn't have those tools, and I was probably a little lazy. So now I can admit that, and I can say that there's no reason to be lazy because it's a click of a mouse to get to places.
Yeah, no, it's great advice. Well, is there anything else?
I think we covered all the stuff we said we wanted to cover. This has been amazing.
Yeah. Well, Brian, how can folks find the boot camp for Breakthrough?
Yeah. So, I mean, finding the boot camp, the best way is to be on my list, which is not a list; it's an online family.
I like that.
I hate using the word list, and I'm a list guy. I came out of the list.
So dehumanizing, right?
It is, but a list is the most important asset you have. So I have to use the word once in a while. But every time I blog weekly, and it's always about my online family. And so being a part of my online family, you'll hear about the next boot camp. You'll also hear about Breakthrough Advertising if you want to buy a copy. Or you have to go to. I just bought the URL breakthroughabvertising.com.
Okay.
Like the guy who came to me with that was great. I own breakthroughabvertisingbook.com. I own breakthrough-advertising.com, but I didn't own breakthroughabvertising.com, just straight breakthroughabvertising.com.
Yeah.
And he offered it to me, and he said, and it was such a beautiful email he sent me. He said, I know what you're doing with the book, and there's no one else that should have this URL except you.
Wow.
Now, I did offer him a certain amount for it that he didn't accept, and I had to pay him a lot more. So money talked.
I was gonna say, he was like, "Well, you could just have it because."
Yeah, no, he was not going to let me have it, which is fine. And I think he gave me a very reasonable price for it.
Very good.
So, breakthroughabvertising.com is the place where you can buy the book. But getting on my list, just go to briankurtz.net. You opt in. There's another long interview there with Perry Marshall. So if you like this interview, by any chance, and there's a lot of content on the site. I have all my blogs going back 7 years.
Oh yeah.
I've got a lot of copywriters toolkit. I've got a lot of stuff in free content.
Yeah.
And then if you want to get my book Overdeliver and also get on into my online family, just go to overdeliverbook.com. amazing bonuses there, thousands of dollars worth of bonuses, some of them priceless, that
They
they're not
are.
available anywhere else. And so you'd have to buy the book for $27 or less for a
It's
Kindle
worth it.
version.
Get it.
But so either briankurtz.net or overdeliverbook.com, and then you'll be part of my online family. You'll read my blog posts. If you want to hear about the Breakthrough Advertising Bootcamp, you'll hear about Titan's Accelerator. On briankurtz.net, there are products, there are, my blog, there are ways to work with me, which are my masterminds. So yeah, I mean, briankurtz.net is a free one-stop place to go, and you opt in, and you never have to buy anything from me, and you're still part of my family. So that's good.
I mean, well, and your list is amazing, because I think it's every Friday, right? You send this.
I send it on Sunday. Well, I send it on Sunday. This is a good tip. I don't know if you do this, but I learned it from somebody. I didn't invent it. But every Sunday, I send my blog post, and I send it at the same time, which is important. You want consistency. I mean, there are some people like Ben Settle who send 7 emails a week, so I don't know what times he sends them, but I do one blog post email a week, and it goes out at 6:00 a.m. Eastern time on Sunday morning, every Sunday. Then what I do is the following Friday, I send the same email blog post to everybody who didn't open on the previous Sunday with a different subject line. So, and that yields me about usually between a 40 and 45% open rate total.
Wow.
And
nice.
And open rates are overrated, by the way. I have a blog post about that, but you have to get them open to get started with engagement. Engagement is the key. So yeah, my posts are usually really long, and I think sometimes there's some good lessons in them. They're fun to write. I write them on Fridays. Yeah, I mean, but I think the lesson there for me was getting consistent with it. And I think that's why, I never get writer's block, because I have to write it every Friday. And I'm always, and the other part of not getting writer's block is to always just be mindful of your surroundings all the time. And of course, in COVID, you couldn't get out much, but you can, I always say, Dan Kennedy has a line that says, marketing by walking around. I say marketing by walking around is not, it's not a choice. It's a requirement.
So taking in your surroundings, looking, and then analyzing, figuring out the story connections.
Even if going into a store that have a clientele, that people that are in your audience, that's marketing by walking around. Going on Facebook into a forum, going to, finding a webinar that's to your audience, and sitting in on it and seeing what the chat says and all of that. So yeah, marketing by walking around is just being totally mindful all the time, and just being mindful all the time so you don't get writer's block, because there's always something to write about.
Always, even in just mundane, home life, there's stuff you could pick. I've been watching Moana about 50 times every week.
Right.
But I'm picking up subtleties. I'm like, okay, I can see the little connection. You can make
it's like Jerry Seinfeld. Jerry Seinfeld made that stuff famous, but there's always stuff in the world that you can comment on. That's where the stand-up comics, that's why the best stand-up comics don't get writer's block.
No, I mean, they do the work, right? They just keep doing the work.
The material's all around them all the time.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
I love it.
Brian, thank you for the extra time with us too, and doing this for round 2. I think
thank you. I really appreciate it. It made my day when you said you'd have me back on.
Well, so overdeliverbook.com, briankurtz.net, breakthroughabvertising.com. We'll link all that stuff up in the show notes so people can have easy access. But yeah, thanks for hanging out with us today.
This is great. And go Padres.
Yeah, go Padres.
My boy. Thanks, Brian. Have a good one.
Thanks.